Okay, why don't we get started? This is sort of a special session of the Cascadia Wildfire Webinar series, which has been going on for 4 years and 11 months. And we've covered a lot of different topics. Had a few volcanologists come on and present in the past. And this session today, which I'm presenting with Michael Armstrong, who's on the left side of my screen there. Michael's formerly from the city of Portland and now works for a nonprofit called City Scale. We've been thinking about some of the similarities between what volcanologists have to deal with in terms of how they interact with the public about hazards and what city managers and city resilience staff are dealing with, particularly related to climate change. And in both cases, there is the issue of how to communicate with people about risk that they have not experienced before, or that their parents haven't, or their grandparents haven't. And specifically, we've been thinking about wildfire coming into the major metros of the Pacific Northwest. But I think the overall arching topic is more about how do we get people to learn from other locations and other times about things that can seriously impact them. Michael, you want to just start off and say a little bit about your background relative to these topics?
Sure. Great. I appreciate the opportunity to meet many of you and to have a chance to work again with you, Jon. As Jon said, I worked for the city of Portland, Oregon for a long time, running the sustainability programs. A couple of your names are familiar to me from way back when. A lot of that was organized around climate change and particularly reducing emissions. Over time, as it became clear, that wasn't going to take care of everything. We increasingly focused on adaptation as well, not at the expense of reducing emissions, but certainly to wrestle with the inevitable. And that brought us into this territory of needing to think about how to understand and communicate and sort of prepare for risks that we hadn't previously dealt with. And so for a long time, it felt like climate was this unique, new sort of issue that didn't really have historical precedence. And I think that's true to some degree, but also realizing there's a ton to be learned from other fields about how you do these things. And Jon helped orient me to the world of volcanology in the sense of, risks that are sort of predictable, but not in time, and how to communicate around and prepare for events that are not socialized and built into the social structure and that are highly localized to local circumstances, issues, threats, and opportunities. And so we're really interested in exploring that. I think about wildfire every time I walk in Forest Park here in Portland, big urban forest. It will burn. It has not burned ever in my lifetime and in others' lifetimes here. We are so unprepared. And so that's just one illustration of this. So I'm really excited to have this conversation and look forward to learning from all of you.
Great. Thank you, Michael. And Michael and I have a PowerPoint, which I'll go through in a minute, but I'm just going to call on people around the screen. If you can just say who you are and your potential connection is with this set of topics. Wendy?
I am at the moment in Qualicum Beach, but I've been living mostly on a little island off of Qualicum Parksville, Vancouver Island, called Lasqueti. And I signed up to be, or inquired about, and have been a fire smart assessor for, this is 5th year. Just out of interest, the rest of my crew are foresters and the like, but I definitely bring something to the team, I would say, and I just always want to learn more, and it just seems there's lots to learn. And here in Qualicum, there has basically been no education, and it's really disturbing to me. So yes, this topic is very relevant.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Suzanne?
Hi, I'm a PhD student in Montreal at McGill University. I'm studying both volcanoes and wildfires, specifically on carbon dioxide emissions and how they may impact health, but also how we may use remote sensing and UAVs actually to collect gas concentrations and basically see or forecast how these hazards might might move, for lack of a better term.
Great. Thanks, Suzanne. That's a pretty unique combination. That you're quite a ringer for this topic. Jeff?
Hi, Jeff Rubin. I was a emergency manager at local level in Oregon for almost 20 years. Also a recovering geologist. I worked with Carolyn, among several others of the crew at Cascades Volcano Observatory on multi-agency coordination plan for Mount Hood way back. We started over 20 years ago and done a couple of updates since then. I do a fair bit of teaching and I guess stumbled on this series a few years ago from a referral. I think I'll be providing the rebuttal for at least some of Jon's theory today.
Thanks. Andy?
Hi, I'm Andy Harris, once of Hawaii, now in central France. I've been working increasingly on triggering of wildfires, wildfires by lava flows. That's to say, direct contact with trees or radiant heating of trees or vegetation. And I'm also beginning to work more and more with local communities to try and increase resilience through interactions with local groups such as local dance groups, local sports groups, local social groups, just to try and communicate the hazards that local communities are exposed to through on the ground work.
Great.
In Italy, France, and England.
Yes.
Sorry.
And Andy is one of several folks on this call and a few not on this call who sent in some ideas when I first proposed that we have a discussion like this. And so I think, as I mentioned in the email that was sent out, there's the potential for some follow-up on this organized by others or whatever, but I think we're just trying to see how we can get some information exchanged across disciplines here. Denise Barrett?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Denise Barrett. I'm, for the last 3 years, I've been the executive director of a small nonprofit working on federal forest policy, specifically the O&C Lands. It's called Forest Bridges, the O&C Forest Habitat Project, based down in Roseburg, but covering the 18 counties in Western Oregon, where we have where the O&C lands exist in a checkerboard with other ownership, state, private, and tribal. Before that, for 11 years, I was the managing director of the Regional Disaster Preparedness Organization, all hazards planning and preparedness in the Portland metropolitan region. So I come, and I know Jeff Rubin very well. I come with that background as well as my current interest, which is to help educate the public about the challenges we have, obviously, and our solutions, our collaborative solutions to mitigating wildfire and improving forest health across those lands. And we're currently in a process of sharing our legislative concepts to see if we can get some traction in terms of law change. So thank you very much. I've been participating for maybe 4 or 5 months now, and I really appreciate the group. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Kumar?
Hi, I'm a Portland-based engineer and technologist, and one of the things I work on is wildfire modeling, and I met Jon through that, and I'm just glad to be here.
Great, thanks, Kumar. Thomas?
I'm Thomas Jacquetti. I'm French and physical volcanologist at the University of Oregon, interested in magma ascent in the conduit and fragmentation and transport in the plume, especially during explosive eruption. And also, I guess one of the reasons why I'm here today is for the past year and a half, I've been leading the effort to organize the next Cities on Volcanoes conference, which will take place in Bend, Oregon in July 2026. And I think that would be a nice excuse for this group to meet more, even show what you've been doing to everybody, like, of course, locally, but also internationally. So I'm happy to talk more about that later if it's of interest.
Yes, that's great, Thomas. And I would like you to connect with Michael Armstrong at some point after this as well. I think he could help in terms of some of the planning you're doing. Staying in Eugene, Joe.
Hi, everybody. Joe Dufek, University of Oregon. I'm in the office right next to Thomas. So, yeah, I'm also working on volcanoes and very much interested in multi-phase fluid dynamics in general. And I think the way I would intersect with this group is we've been working on a variety of sensors that we like to measure volcanic ash, but also forest fire ash, and then integrating this with numerical simulations.
Great. And I'm going to stick with the Eugene people here. Doug?
Good afternoon. Doug Toomey. I'm not allowed to be in the building that Thomas and Joe are in. They put me in a different building. And I'm also in the Earth Sciences Department at U of O. Trained in seismology. I'm the director of the Oregon Hazards Lab. We run a statewide network for Shake Alert, which is an earthquake early warning system along the entire West Coast. And we have an expanding wildfire camera network throughout the state as well. We have approximately 300 total sites between seismic and wildfire. It's a real-time network that provides situational awareness to the public and to first responders. And we're also expanding in terms of our sensor suites and application of AI. We use AI already to send out alerts or to detect anomalies and then have them be verified before it goes out to first responders. And we're expanding that effort through a large NSF project called SAGE, which was recently funded. And that'll have AI at the edge sort of nodes to do that work.
Excellent. Thank you, Doug. Yoshi?
Hey everyone, Johan Gilchrist, otherwise known as Yoshi. I'm a postdoc working with Joe Dufek here at University of Oregon, studying the dynamics of volcanic ash plumes and starting to venture into the wildfire plume world. I'm interested in improving monitoring and understanding of the dynamics in real time to feed that information to first responders and try to understand conditions that lead to pyroconvective clouds forming, which obviously change the danger. Also interested in all things geohazards and response to climate change, glaciers, landslides, outburst floods, as well as obviously volcanic eruption hazards.
Thanks, Yoshi. And Jonathan Yoder?
Hi, everyone. I'm an economist at Washington State University, School of Economic Sciences, and the director of the State of Washington Water Research Center. Apologies, I won't be on very long. I'll just stay on until I've got to sign off. Nice to meet everyone.
Thanks. Thanks, Jonathan. Ethan?
I'm Ethan Shregan. I'm a demographer at Portland State University and interested in wildfire migration decisions people make after they've been affected by living in or nearby a wildfire.
Great. Owen Fairbank?
Hi, I'm in Olympic Peninsula in Washington. A little background in geology, help manage the local community forest, which is surrounded by rural residential. So it's not exactly today's topic, but I found these sessions very interesting and I'm here to listen. Thanks.
Thank you. Great. Chloe Harford?
Well, hi, everyone. I'm new to this group. So my background originally was volcanology. I worked on Montserrat's eruption in the early days at the Volcano Observatory and did my PhD there. And then I came to the Pacific Northwest. I live in Seattle to join Zillow's founding team and have spent the last 20 years in tech. And then I'm increasingly interested in turning that experience kind of back to earth sciences and how we can help address the climate crisis. And so doing a number of things, including I've been working with Overstory using machine learning and satellite data. So I've been on their board to help utilities understand vegetation and help prevent wildfires. And then I'm also on the Advisory Council of Earth Lab at the University of Washington, and just really interested in this intersection of volcanology and the climate crisis and wildfires.
Terrific. Thank you for joining us. And I say, Chloe, if you or anybody else wants to do one of these presentations at some point, just let me know. We're holding these more or less monthly. Jeremy Fried?
I'm with the U.S. Forest Service, PNW Research Station in Corvallis, where we apply forest inventory science to assess forest fire resistance and opportunities to enhance resistance through forest and fuels management. We've also looked at the impacts of the 2020 Labor Day fires on Oregon forests. And quite a while back, I worked on community willingness to support fuels management and to assess homeowners' willingness to pay to reduce risk to their homes at the wildland urban interface. So I have an interest in this area. Looking forward to those patients.
Super relevant. Thank you. And Brian?
Hi, I'm Brian Weens. I work for Canada Wildfire, which is basically an organization that tries to find an intersection between operational fire agencies and academic research. And so we have done a variety of different things over the years, but certainly a lot of times we're looking for ways to give better tools to the operational agencies, which of course includes helping them find really effective ways to communicate risk and help people prepare in advance.
Great. And Brian, maybe you can put something in the chat if people want to sign up for your very helpful newsletters. Cassie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cassie Lacey. I work at the City of Bend. I lead our climate and environmental work here. A lot of my work has actually been focused on climate mitigation, but as a city, we're sort of dipping our toe more and more into climate resiliency and climate risk work as it impacts our community. Definitely wildfire is sort of the, a big focus for us. I work closely with our emergency management team as well on climate risk and response, and I'm hoping that they can join the conversation too. I'm brand new to this group. I was invited by Michael Armstrong to join today. So yeah, looking forward to learning more.
Thanks, Cassie. And I think it also would be worthwhile for you to talk with Thomas about the conference that's coming up next year.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Paul.
Using a different camera than usual. Hi, everyone. I'm Paul Oiketh. I'm new to this group. I'm an associate professor at Portland State, and I'm an atmospheric scientist. I am particularly interested in extreme weather events and the meteorology behind them in Western US and how that fits in with climate change and how those are being affected by global warming.
Thank you, Paul. And I'm saving the best for last, Larry and then Carolyn. Larry's one of the few volcanologists who has been pretty regular in this group.
Well, thank you, John. So I've known John since John's volcanology days, and I've worked at the Cascades Volcano Observatory, U.S. Geological Survey since 1990. My specialty in the last 15 years or so has been atmospheric dispersal of tephra, dynamics of volcanic plumes, and impacts of volcanic ash on aviation, but generally volcanic ash hazards. And so I think probably the relevance of my interest and expertise to wildfires is probably the downwind effects. But I retired in August. I'm still emeritus, but I'm thinking maybe I have a little more time to branch out into other aspects of atmospheric effects of downwind dispersal, and wildfires seems to be an obvious way of branching out. So I'm looking forward to learning more with this group.
Thanks, Larry, and thanks for your past participation. Carolyn.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carolyn Dreger. I'm a scientist emerita with the USGS Cascades Volcano Observatory, and I began a career in the 1970s in the Project Office Glaciology in Tacoma, branched out. We actually were looking at glacier climate interactions, but it was deemed too academic a subject, and the whole project office closed. I went to a water office and then to the Cascades Volcano Observatory. I think one of the events that really clinched my interest in outreach, it has been, which I worked on since 1995 until through 2022, was being involved with the eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980, and seeing that we as scientists weren't as prepared. I also had a chance to witness the interest of officials and the public after that time. And I have been able to make use of the kind of the informal volcanic risk management system that has been set up since that time, whereby many professions are interested in volcanoes and feed their own missions as well as the mission of the larger group. I've been involved with all the working groups, and along with Jeff Rubin, I have been involved with many working groups, actually, I think, and other ventures. So in volcano education. So I guess my interest here today is to talk about what we learned in bringing volcano science to people. And I guess that's the main part of it. So much more to be said.
Thanks, Carolyn. And Carolyn sent me a set of publications and other documents about 45 minutes ago, which I'm very much looking forward to going through. And Wilf, if you're there, just quickly introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, John. Wilf Pinfold. I have a nonprofit called Open Commons. We're very involved in working with National Institute of Standards and Technology on smart city resilience. So I'm very interested in the discussion today. Thanks, John.
Okay, thanks. Okay, let me see if I can get this to work. Can you guys see a PowerPoint? Yes, okay. So I've got, whatever this is, 15 slides. I'm going to go through them pretty fast just to kind of set the stage and follow up on a couple of things we've been talking about. This is from a presentation I did last year where I was just trying to see what kind of drawings ChatGPT could come up with. So that's where most of the credits are. And I was going to start off with a land acknowledgement here saying that I'm from the unconsumed nation of Canada, which is, but anyway, I won't go into that right now. So the basic idea here, as we've been talking about already, is what volcanology can offer to city officials who are dealing with a variety of climate-related risks. And let's see, how do I do this? So 2 points I'm going to make. One is that each volcano has its own peculiarities, as does each city, as well as having a lot of generality. So for volcanoes, we need to figure out what the hazards are that they can generate, who's around them, what are the most vulnerable populations, how are decisions made, and what can be afforded in terms of response. And again, I think Carolyn and Andy and many others here could add to this list, but just trying to set the stage that while we know a lot about volcanology in general, each observatory and each set of scientists looking at a particular volcano need to customize that information from around the world for their local situation.
John, sorry to interrupt. I
Yep.
at least am no longer seeing your screen.
Oh, darn. All right.
That first slide showed, but now it's all blank.
Yep. 1 sec. Is it back?
It's back. Yep.
All right.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. So there have been volcano observatories since 1841, and they have local staff, and they are a network that has been talking to each other for getting close to 200 years, sharing information from each of the individual volcanoes and eruptions to put together a body of knowledge, which is what volcano science is about. So what the observatories do, and again, we've got experts here who can talk about this in more detail, is to take the global knowledge and localize it to the conditions of a particular volcano and a particular eruption. The types of activities that go on are to monitor, provide warnings, coordinate emergency response, educate the public, assess future hazards, share data, conduct research, and train the next generation of volcano scientists. At the same time, observatories or government volcano research and response agencies distribute the knowledge around the world. And the group that I've been most familiar with is from the USGS, the Volcano Disaster Assistance Program. But there are similar groups from many different countries OECD countries that have gone to take the knowledge that we have and brought them to low and middle income countries, and in the process learning a great deal which they can then share with others around the world. The VDAP program and its counterparts have been very much a two-way street, where the groups that have the technology and have some of the past experience bring that to a new place and then take what's learned there and share it. And these groups work really hard to avoid scientific colonialism, so to make sure that the locals can share their knowledge, their local knowledge, with the rest of the global community. So this key problem that I think is the basis for the discussion today is, how do you communicate about unprecedented risk? As Carolyn said, at Mount St. Helens, this was very much a case where nobody who lived around Mount St. Helens had experienced an eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980. And so one can try to bring experience from other parts of the world, from other volcanoes, to the local populations and educate them. Maurice and Katja Kraft, the volcano cinematographers, did a lot of this kind of work, trying to take very dramatic imagery and films of violent eruptions, and then tried to transfer those or transport those to local settings for other places where there was potential risk or incipient risk. But this is kind of a key question that's been that volcanologists have been involved with for a long time. So now turning to cities, same kind of questions. All cities have different sets of hazards. They have different populations in different locations, different ways of making decisions, and different amounts of resources to deal with the threats that they're facing. And from a variety of perspectives, cities are being heavily impacted by climate change through all of the means that are the aspects that we're all aware of. This group is focused primarily on wildfire and smoke, but there could be, and probably are, comparable groups talking about lots of other impacts of climate change and how they're affecting cities. So one of the questions that Michael and I were puzzling about, and we've talked with a few of the rest of you about, is does there need to be something like a volcano disaster assistance program, I should say climate disaster assistance program, for climate for cities? And that's one of the things we might chat about a little bit today. What could city hazard observatories and disaster assistance programs do? So here's a list similar to what I had on the slide about volcano observatories. So whatever this kind of facility might be in a city, it could monitor the urban climate impacts, could provide early warnings of risks, coordinate emergency response, educate the public, assess future hazards, share data with other cities, conduct urban hazards research, derive city hazard models, and train future urban planners or urban emergency managers. Now, again, there are groups doing all of these things in city government and in county government and in state government, in some cases in federal government, although federal connection with cities is not always that clear. But there isn't, in the case of Mount St. Helens, the USGS set up the Cascade Volcano Observatory in Vancouver, Washington, and that was the hub for response to eruptions there. To my knowledge, there isn't anything similar in city governments where they have a coordinated group that could do all of these different functions. So the similarities between what volcanologists are dealing with and what urban climate people are dealing with is that the events are outside the normal experience of most residents. These tend to be low frequency, high impact events, although in the case of climate, they are becoming more and more frequent and more familiar to people. In the case of several of the climate related issues, as cities are spreading out into rural areas or bordering areas, that's putting more populations at risk. And then climate change is exacerbating a lot of these dangers. In many cases, we have warnings that some of these hazards might be getting critical. And that's true for most volcanic eruptions where we have some warning ahead of time. Some of the climate risks for cities, we can see them coming a few days to, in some cases, a few weeks in advance, but many others we can't. Another issue and complication is that the jurisdiction of who's responsible for responding can be really complicated. I think, again, Carolyn can comment on the situation at Mount St. Helens in 1980. There were federal officials and state officials and local communities all trying to figure out how do they have a coordinated response. So I think we've learned a lot about coordination in the 40 plus years since then, but there's more to do. One of the other issues is that, especially now, media, we have a lot of media input on and coverage of all of these events, but it doesn't last very long. And so the long-term responses that are necessary, like in Los Angeles right now, most of us aren't thinking about that the way we were in January, and that's a problem. Also, the recovery can take years, both for eruptions and for some of these climate-related issues in cities. And each situation is unique, so it's not like there is a complete playbook that we can draw from. The differences between climate response and volcano response is that, at least to date, volcano science has not been politicized to the level that climate science has, although the way things are changing in the US, who knows? Volcanoes are mostly a federal responsibility, at least in the US, probably in most countries, but climate responsibilities, again, it's a much more complicated landscape. I think that historically, as Michael was commenting at the beginning about what the city of Portland was trying to do about climate change, people have a sense that they can have some personal influence or collective influence on climate change. At least that's the theory behind mitigation. But there's not as much of that attitude about volcanic eruptions. Maybe once an eruption starts, if it's a lava flow, there's the possibility of diverting it, but it's a pretty different kind of response. The climate change risks for cities have really only been appreciated relatively recently, the last several decades, compared to other issues that cities have been dealing with. And whereas for volcanology and for volcanoes, that's been true for more than a century. Cities face a mix of predictable and unpredictable risks. For volcanoes, most of them are predictable in type, maybe not in scale. I think for the case of the big eruption of May 18th, 1980 at Mount St. Helens, my recollection is that Barry Voigt, who was a volcanologist at Penn State, had a pretty good prediction of what would happen. Not many others did at the time. And then, as mentioned in the earlier slides, there aren't dedicated observatories today to monitor urban climate risks. So the last question is whether we need to have some sort of observatories or some sort of equivalent to the volcano disaster assistance programs for cities dealing with climate hazards. And you can read through these bullets here. They kind of repeat things that I've been saying. So I think for the rest of the discussion, can volcanologists advise cities about climate hazard response? And also the other issues that many of you have been thinking about that you brought up in the introductions, which we can certainly explore further. And Michael, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I really appreciate this. And I'm glad you have laid it all out here. You know, from a city government perspective, and Cassia, it's great to have you here. And I think those of us working in city government have a range of kind of relationships and sort of institutional connections to our counterparts who do work directly on emergency preparedness and other things. So there's a lot of variety. I'm quite interested in hearing from those of you who do have experience with the volcano observatories. Has that been valuable? How are there lessons that you see that those of us who've worked specifically on climate could learn from? And are there ways we can sort of structure that information exchange so the climate world can learn from your longer experience? And yeah, obviously this could go many directions. And I think the Cities on Volcanoes conference would be one interesting place to perhaps lift up and explore some of these things. Many other possible avenues in the meantime, interested in specifics people may have in mind on that.
And before we open it up to your comments, I just want to ask Ralph Blomers, who's joined us. You could just quickly introduce yourself, Ralph. I think you represent a critical need in this discussion in terms of how do we communicate to people about risks that they've never experienced before.
Thanks, John. Appreciate that. Ralph Bloomers. I am the Director of Fire Safe Communities, and I do a variety of things from produce episodes on extreme weather and preparedness around wildfire for PBS. Made the film Elemental Reimagined Wildfire. And here in Portland, actually, on April 3rd, John, I'm working with City of Portland Fire and bringing up a couple folks from Marin Wildfire Authority and Fire Safe Marin, who are, maybe 5-10 years ahead of us, but I'd like to get where they are in 3 years. And doing a thing with the Firewise community groups that have formed since Eagle Creek and Labor Day 2020. There's nearly 10 of them in Portland. And, I'm really interested in this piece of like, how do we bring humor and comedy and culture to change, the communication that's happening around like the wildfire prepared home? Because I'll just give one quick example. People do not think of their house as a structure. They do not think of their garden as a non-combustible zone. But that's how the fire services and the insurance industry talks about it, because that's what the research, tells us, and it's correct. But what we need to figure out, I think, if we want to scale up the mitigations that matter, is how do we talk about it in the language and the way people think of their sanctuary and their home and their garden, and make it cool and make it interesting and make it aesthetically beautiful. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do is work with like landscape architects and builders and Architectural Digest and Dwell magazine and all that kind of thing to like figure out that communication within cities. So not only people know like what are the target conditions we're dealing with, fast wind driven fires that are ember storms, but like there are solutions that still make it a beautiful place to live and have a wildfire prepared home. So it's kind of like bridging that gap is another project that I touched on a little bit in a previous presentation.
Thanks, Ralph. That's great. Maybe Andy Harris, you want to just say a little bit more about just picking up on what Ralph was saying and the project that you were telling me about in terms of using soccer teams and just finding other ways to connect with people to get them to be thinking collectively about some of these dangers that they might face.
Yeah, thanks, John. We've been working for a few years now with a French-Italian, Franco-Italian group to increase the knowledge of the hazards to which a local community is exposed to. In our case, it's the island of Volcano, where they're exposed to tsunami, volcanic eruptions, and of course, climate change. And we've worked with the local dance group. We've worked with the local sports groups, and we've worked with the local children's scouts groups. And we've done things like working with professional photographers to do portraits of the children, both in the visual sense with their hazard behind them and within them, if you like. in the infrared and the visual, and we've put posters up around the town. We've done a dance routine which was performed on the local harbour, which was called Earth, Wind and Fire, which is all about how they could live and survive and understand their local situation. And I'm now working with a young photographer from Marseille, and she's doing a photo montage of all the children on the island in their hazard context. The current one is called In the Face of the Wave, which are the children faced with a wave, a tsunami that could potentially hit them in less than 1 minute. And they need to know what to do, where to go, what the signs are, basically how to escape without any warning whatsoever. And we're doing this mostly on National Geographic funding, UNESCO funding, and local funding. And I'm increasingly trying to draw in sports groups, including the sportsmen themselves, to say, hey, I've played for Italy in goal, and now I'm here back at home. And I can tell you, I understand the international perspective in terms of climate change and where I go and where I live, and now I'm back here. I'm a big hero locally, and that message probably hits home much more than some dumb scientist turning up saying, "Oh yeah, yada yada yada."
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Thanks. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Ralph.
Jonathan, I'll just respond. I mean, there's been some really neat communication done by USGS and fun, like there's this like don't roast marshmallows over lava, or like there's this ridiculous one with a chicken, I think in Hawaii with volcanology. I just posted a couple Instagram ones. One, what you were talking about, Harris, in terms of how do you bring music and identity of the culture into the message. It can be grounded in science, but it's not a scientist, telling you what to think and delivering the conclusion. It's more bringing the joy and the fun. And I think the one from the Caribbean is set to a Caribbean beat, and then the other one is a Barbie one, which is a Barbie home wildfire prepared. But I think people are feeling like in the wake of Altadena and Palisades, the Eaton and Palisades fire, and anytime a community burns or any time a community is disrupted, I feel a bit of quiet rage and just sadness, but also channeling that to like, is it time to piss people off, or should we just go to the in-between space of getting edgy and trying new things and trying things that might not land perfectly, which is all what comedy is all about. And like the sports heroes, I've been thinking like my dream would be a Super Bowl ad that's like, do a screenplay and then you screen the vents on your house, or do defense and then you're removing the connected fence that could burn your house. And you could probably come up, someone from Canada could probably come up with a bunch of hockey metaphors for wildfire preparedness, right? And I think it's just kind of like each culture and community needs to be reached in the way that they see themselves and like what their questions are. Because some of them, it might be money, some of it might be will, some of them it might be will and money that you need to overcome for them to do the thing. But just like bringing the humor, I think is a challenging, fun way to go for it. So it's cool to hear that you're doing that.
Yeah,
And
I
then
agree totally, because we started this project just as Volcano, the island, was coming out of a very harsh Italian lockdown. So these poor guys, about, I don't know, 250 of them, had been locked on their island for 1 year. And then the children were allowed to not be locked down for about 3 or 4 weeks. And then the volcano went back into eruption, unrest, and they got locked down again. And these poor guys were just stuck there on their own. What about 20 children between the ages of 18 and 4, totally on their own. And we had them jumping through fire hoops. We had them dancing and laughing. The parents were crying. It was absolutely gorgeous. But it was all about the scientists and the artists and the local community all getting together to make this massive festival that was not a publication, it was not science, it was just a local festival. In fact, we had to do it covert because at the time we were still under COVID Italian lockdown conditions. And the Carabinieri, the local police force, said, no, you can't do it. So we went and did it in one of the children's parents' gardens, which happened to be this hotel with a lovely pool and stuff like that. And we just did this spontaneously. And it brought the community together so beautifully to understand what they'd been exposed to and what they were likely to be exposed to. And it was such a bonding experience. It was gorgeous. Sorry to be emotional, but it was a lovely time.
Thanks, Andy. Others, Carolyn, you want to comment at all from your work relative to how to get this kind of information across in a way that doesn't immobilize people with depression and fear, but actually gets them to take some action?
Sure. So I'll start with the 1990s or actually go back to the 1980s when a lot of people, a lot of public officials had been working at Mount St. Helens during 6 years of eruptions. So they were involved in eruption response. And they really took all this to heart and realized that they also had volcanoes in their backyards. And Mount Rainier, Mount Hood, on and on.
I'd love to see more geologists involved in everything. I think the bigger issue is that scientists, there's a substantial unfilled role for scientists in all aspects of hazard reduction. I mean, it's sort of the talk I've been giving at Geological Society of America for years, and writing a few short articles. But we can far better inform things like hazard vulnerability analyses, credible scenarios. And the class we're teaching next week in Puyallup, which is a FEMA class for community volcano preparedness, was actually derived from what Carol and I and quite a few others did for trying to communicate the hazards to just local populations and elected officials from Mount Hood back 20 plus years ago. And I think one of the key aspects that we repeatedly emphasize is this, volcanoes are one of the few hazards that have this whole series of uncertain event paths. A doesn't necessarily lead to B. It can lead, you get a little activity and it can keep going. It can increase, it can decrease, it can go the opposite direction. And that's really hard to do any kind of, active planning or decision making. We'll always pitch, scientists don't make the decisions, we recommend, but it's really difficult to drive that home. I think part of the challenge is communicating the difference between inevitability and imminence. You see that with Cascadia all the time. We're due, we're overdue. It's like, no, we're not either. But saying it's a matter of when and not if. The sun will eventually make Earth uninhabitable in a few billion years. That's not really helpful. And I think while I would love to see earth scientists get more involved, and I try to recruit folks out of school to do that. I still think we vastly underestimate the role of social scientists, whether it's anthropologists from the cultural side or psychologists, sociologists for the direct communication side. I know I'm not the only one on this call who thinks that. Scientists in general, we don't do a great job of communicating in that it's give people objective information and let them go from there. That doesn't work great. public safety folks and emergency managers. I'll say we for that as well. It's mostly response focused or following or wrote, buy a kit, get a plan, whatever other useful stuff we want to say. If we don't understand how people perceive risk, I don't think we can effectively communicate it. And I think that's been our big challenge. We've been dealing with hazards that have not, most people here haven't experienced in the Northwest for decades. Major earthquakes, lahars in populated areas, pandemics until 2020, huge wildfires in populated areas, even though we had a fire history. So we have always had to address that problem, either learning from other people's misfortune or from projections or from exercises. I don't think that's the issue. It's how can we best apply the range of sciences and do so in a manner that's going to be engaging. I love some of the other stuff I'm hearing. I just don't think any of this is terribly new. I also don't think it is specific to volcanology.
Right. Carolyn, how's your connection?
Yeah, my connection's back. Sorry. So so I wanted to point out that back in the late 1980s, early 1990s, these volcano hazard working groups were formed in Oregon and Washington. It's the first one started at Mount Rainier. And I point this out because, in my view, socialization person-to-person socialization has been the most important factor in our successes. So when people get to know each other, they get to understand their needs. They understand that each community's needs, each profession's needs, and then they can move forward. We realize that we can enlist, there's nothing that we can do, that if just a few of us can do, to influence large sections of the population. But if we enlist the support of communications focused professions, then we can really just amplify our messages very quickly. So at Mount Rainier, for example, we looked at who could help us with this, who could help us amplify our messages about volcano hazards of that volcano. And we identified the news media. We had to really focus on them and meet their needs, learn how to meet their needs effectively. We realized that educators must teach about volcanoes in their community. So let's help them do it. Realize that park people could help us a lot. I'm getting a little bit of feedback because Larry Master just moved across the room from me.
Okay.
And then emergency managers, of course. So we realize that each of those groups can help us, and that's the only way we could get our message out. And to help with that as well, we realize that a lot of people remembered Mount St. Helens, and that's what drove them initially. But we realized that over time, people were not, the profession were not old enough to remember Mount St. Helens. They were no longer motivated by what they had seen in the 1980s. And so through VDAP, through the Volcano Disaster Assistance Program that Jon's mentioned, we started a binational exchange program where we made a dozen trips we brought public officials from Mount Rainier, from Mount St. Helens, from Mount Baker Glacier Peak area, down to the nation of Colombia. We took them to Armero, Colombia, and Popayan in southern Colombia. We showed them the damage. We helped them we introduced people who were survivors of the 1985 lahar disaster at Armero, the base of Nevada de Ruiz, where 25,000 people lost their lives because of ineffective communications. 25,000 people lost their lives there. We talked to the survivors. We had our people talk to theirs, and back and forth, where they shared pictures of their fire trucks in their respective nations, talked about their communities. They formed personal relationships and, in a sense of personal accountability, that they would go back to their community and they pledged that they would work on behalf of volcano hazard risk reduction. That has led to, that whole program has led to spectacular results in terms of motivating a new generation of emergency managers and educators, public officials of many brands, fire chiefs, etc., to move volcanic risk reduction forward. Now, Jeff mentioned the scenario, the exercise is happening. Was it next Tuesday or next Wednesday or so, Puyallup? I think one of the principals there will be Kirsten Hoffman, who we took to Colombia in 2018, and she said, I need to go back to my community and we need to put the evacuation routes and the volcano evacuation drills on steroids. So, you know, the numbers went up. How many school children would be impacted? It would, or how would participate in these drills? It was, first it was, you know, 2,000, then it was 8,000, then it was 14,000. And I think 24,000 now. I think in 2026, it's going to be 45,000 people involved in this Lahar evacuation drill. So, and it's all because of the socialization that happened, where she could actually personalize this and put it into, you know, apply it to her profession. I've talked to Kirsten about this, saying, you know, this is a very high impact but low frequency event. How can you justify, you know, mobilizing all these people in your community? And she said, oh, that's easy. She said, once we have their attention, we can look at, you know, floods, we can look at wildfire, we can look at windstorms, we can look at, you know, volcanic eruptions, and the people have our attention, and they know who to listen to, you know, where they're going to get their information. So basically they are leveraging volcano hazards to address all these different hazards. Wanted to speak also about a very interesting phenomenon that I've seen in Colombia. This is speaking to what Andy had to say about, you know, novel ways of getting children involved in next generation. So in Colombia, they run these, they call them biennials. These are biennial gatherings of children from volcanic regions all around the nation. I've been to 2 of these now and watched them. It's fantastic. I love to see this in the United States for climate change, wildfire, volcanoes, anything. Hasn't happened yet, but the students are selected. Maybe only 200, 300 come from around the nation. They're specially selected, and they put on skits. They put on cultural dances that are germane to their region. They show lab experiments that they do in their classroom to demonstrate volcano processes. And they do this for the entire, they plan this for months on end, and then, you know, put it on display at these biennials. So this is a kind of event where we can reach large numbers of people and also socialize them. They all get to know each other, see each other from one year to the next. So socialization, person-to-person socialization, to me is just very important. Teacher workshops, training of park interpreters, training of the news media. You know, these are all ways to, you know, socialize science with these other communication professionals who can amplify our messages. So I guess that's the bottom line for the moment.
Great, thank you. One comment I was going to add to what Andy was saying about Volcano is the overlap of hazards and this whole phenomenon of cascading and compounding hazards, which is happening more and more specifically within geologic hazards, like with Pinatubo and the typhoon that came through, but also the combination of climate related and other geologic hazards. We haven't historically trained people to deal with lots of hazards simultaneously. I mean, that's not part of many of the training programs that we had back when I was learning these things, and maybe Carolyn and Larry were, but that's part of what we need to be doing from an educational standpoint. As I mentioned in the chat, I mean, it's after 2 o'clock. Those of you who need to go, feel free to go. I'd love to hear some more comments from anybody who would like to chime in. Thomas, do you want to say anything about the meeting next year and how you see potentially some of these ideas getting presented there?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a few slides if you want, or if it's too much, just let me know. I can definitely say a few words.
Yeah, why don't you just speak?
Okay. So so for those of you who don't know Cities and Volcanoes, it's a conference organized every 2 years by the IFC, which is the International Association of Volcanology and Chemistry of the Earth Interior, and NDRS is actually a vice president of IFC. And so they have a commission called Cities and Volcanoes. And so this commission is in charge of choosing the next city that will host this conference. So the conference has been around for about 25 years. And the last time it was in the US was in 2003 in Hilo, in Hawaii. And so last year it was in Guatemala and so on. So the goal of this conference is to, well, first happen in a city that is by a volcano, on a volcano that is potentially impacted by volcanoes. And I became a volcanologist because of people and volcanoes. And I kind of like forgot about that with time and just focusing on the science itself. And so a few years ago, I thought about like trying to have citizen volcanoes in the Pacific Northwest, and discussing with colleagues here. We put a proposal to have it in Bend in 2026, and it was successful. And so this will happen in July of 2026. I can give you more information about that. It will be between, up to 1,200 people talking about volcanoes, but in all the way you can think about it. So not only the science, of course, but mostly about preparedness, emergency managers, talking with educators, with artists, with like every aspect of the volcanoes and the people. So we've got 4 different themes that we've developed with colleagues, and one is about people and volcanoes. Second one is like one you might be interested in, which is assessing, communicating, and preparing for volcanic hazard and risk. The third one is volcanoes in the education and the arts. And the fourth one is volcanoes as evolving landscapes. And so we will issue the call for a session proposal in a few days or weeks. We are putting the website together right now. We've got a group of 6 international people working on the program itself. Some of them are from Volcanoes Observatory. Some of them are from like social sciences interested in volcanoes. When I say we are like 80 right now working on the organization of this conference, from federal agencies, state agencies, local companies, local program, people interested in raising awareness, preparedness, emergency management, sheriffs, firefighters, and so on. I just put in the link in the chat, a link to a board game that was created by a faculty in UC Davis to raise awareness on wildfire. And so he did that with firefighters and colleagues. That was funded by the National Science Foundation, and he agreed to do the same for the city of Bend for volcanoes for the conference. One big thing of the conference is that on the Wednesday of the conference, there's no talk, there's no poster, and most of the time we do field trips to nearby volcanoes. This time we've chosen to do an eruption exercise. So we are working with Dogami, with Oregon Emergency Management, with the Oregon Health Authority, Oregon Department of Health Sciences, and so on, Health Services, sorry, to develop a one-day eruption exercise that we can all do with the people attending the conference. And in parallel of that, we will have also a volcano fair in Bend, so in a public park, open to everybody, free for everybody, and not only people attending the conference, but also all citizens of Bend and beyond, to learn more about volcanoes and how to prepare for like a potential volcanic eruption. So of course there will be like FEMA there, the Red Cross, like prepare your emergency kit, learning about the facts about volcanoes in the Pacific Northwest. So like a big group. You can be part of it if you want to. I've got many like documents we are all currently working on. We've organized ourselves in different groups interested in like really the logistic of the conference, the program itself, the eruption scenario, the preparedness fair, the finding sponsors and donors, outreach, and so on. So
Thomas,
just, if you want to know more for this group, there's like the opportunity of trying to organize a session exactly about what we discussed today and beyond. There's also the possibility to organize a workshop before or after the conference, or even during, focused on communicating hazards related to both climate and volcanic eruption. Or I don't know, however you want to fine tune it. But you would have the audience there, like the audience of not only local people interested in like the hazards in the Pacific Northwest specifically, but also people who do that every day, communicating hazards like around the world.
Great. Thank you very much, Thomas. I think specifically given the threats that Bend faces from wildfire, looking at that intersection of volcanology and wildfire preparedness, and I don't know, Yoshi, if you want to make a comment just about this idea that if you want to study explosive volcanic phenomena, one of the ways to do it is to look at the pyrocumulonimbus from fires, just because they happen a lot more frequently than the volcanic example. So finding some more of these intersections might be beneficial in both directions.
Yeah, and my concerns are what can we do to make, for example, rapid response teams that can take portable instruments that can get amazing data that we can then feed into computationally fast 1D models on our computers in the moment, and then feed that data to first responders. That's kind of what I've been thinking about. And they have such rapid response teams that are deployed for monitoring tornadoes and storms in the Midwest. A lot of those instruments they use could be used for these purposes, and dovetailed in with what Doug Toomey's work is doing with Alert West. So, there's different stages of how you identify a wildfire plume and then have a team go out. And then with, for example, the balloons that Joe's lab is developing, deploy those, have a Doppler LiDAR, and then you get this data. You can run the data in a model on your laptop and then feed that to first responders. And then this could also be used in the case of a volcanic eruption. If you have this kind of team or infrastructure available for the more common pyrocumulonimbus wildfire plumes, and then they would be practiced already on those wildfire plumes and responding to them. So it could serve multiple purposes, and there's no reason that they have to be distinctly separate. But John, you raise a good point. Like, we have wildfire plumes all the time in this country, and it's a perfect place to test some of the models we're trying to improve for volcanic plumes on these wildfire plumes themselves, and vice versa.
Yeah, thanks. And just one of Jeff's comments about his attempts to get more geologists to think about some of these emergency management issues. I think for many of us who maybe started off at more of pure science, we get drawn to wanting to have some more utility of the work that we're doing. And so can you speed that up in a way so that grad students can get some of these more practical experiences and not have that jeopardize their success if they want to go on an academic path or something more research oriented?
Or maybe
go ahead.
choose that instead of an academic path, because part of it, it's not necessarily working as for an agency or in research. It's saying, hey, I want to work in local government or whatever.
Right. Well, I think, yes. And Elon Musk is helping move people in that direction by decimating federal agencies. Andy, you had a comment. And then anybody else, please feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we could use the upcoming meeting in Geneva for AFC to get together to arrange or set up what Thomas is suggesting there. A meeting, a working group together, a brainstorming group, just over lunch or dinner one night.
Yeah, I won't be there. Yoshi, you going over to that?
Yeah, I'll be there. I'm happy to join that. That'd be great.
Great. Yeah. Chloe, anything you hear that's relevant to what you're working on or your background?
I've enjoyed learning what this group is about, and yeah, I'm trying to figure out how I could be potentially helpful. I certainly have, a number of years of experience at the Montserrat Volcano Observatory, where we benefited a lot from the Mount St. Helens experiences. Some ideas have kind of popped into my head of, really effective communication that was done there, as well as less effective communication. One in particular, Arrow, who was the famous singer. I have young kids now who grew up in Seattle, and they are big fans of Arrow, and they sing his volcano songs today. They're very catchy, Caribbean soca music.
Nice.
And I'm sure there's lots of other examples like that. And I'd love to find ways to contribute to this group. That's my initial little thing I can think of.
Have you been down to Cascade Volcano Observatory and met with people there?
I haven't. Once I climbed St. Helens with them. That's exciting, but I'd love to find ways to get involved.
Yeah, great. And Suzanne, if you're still on, given what your dissertation is focused on, any thoughts from the discussion today?
Mostly, I've just been really happy to listen to everybody. The emergency management perspective is something that I'm really interested in. I need to find a way to pitch it to my supervisor as a potential chapter for my thesis, but it's something that has always been something I wanted to integrate with the actual research as well. So I would be very happy to learn more from all of y'all at some point, and I hope to hear from you at some point again in the future.
Good. My guess is that Andy Harris could influence John Sticks to loosen up some of your requirements there. Michael, anything else from your perspective?
No, it's been super helpful for me just to hear the different perspectives. And then certainly I just, maybe Tomas, I can follow up with you and sort of test that we have the engagement from local officials that you'd like. Sounds like a lot of it's in place, which is great. I'll be interested in expanding that if it's helpful. So happy to follow up later.
Great. Yoshi?
Yeah, just want to, building on the discussion of outreach and, activities involving kids. When I was at UBC, the Pacific Museum of the Earth there, I would do the K through 12 workshops on various topics. And one, obviously, for me was volcanoes, which, to be honest, sell themselves to kids. I mean, they love it. And, when you show them that all these mountains in Vancouver that they can see are actually volcanoes, it really touches home. And then they go home and talk to their parents about it. So actually, that's a great way to, raise awareness. And not only that, it provided me as a grad student with a volunteer work that was good on my resume, but also paid a little bit. Taught me how to do science outreach and communication, which I think is crucial to teach our graduate students and undergrads. And that's work I want to try to continue to do here. And the teachers, the K through 12 teachers love it because they get a day off. Like they can, the kids still learn a ton and the teachers get a break, which they definitely need once in a while. So I thought that was a great program, and encouraging grad students, even professors, to go out to local K through 12 schools to deliver these pre-packaged presentations that are custom tailored to that local environment is a very effective way to do outreach, I think. And I think, a lot of these disasters we're trying to monitor, they're fascinating when you actually look at them, and there's so many videos of them now, and the kids are totally enthralled by that. And so I think it sells itself. We just need to get it out there in new ways. And the other thing I just want to bring up as an example was that at UBC, we did a collaboration, the Earth Science Department and the Music Department, where I met with a quintet, a brass quintet, and then a composer, and I basically taught them about my research and explosive eruptions and how they work, shared a bunch of videos. The composer then composed a score, and then they practiced, and we kind of got the mood feeling right and made sure it communicated sort of musically how I felt an eruption would go down. And then they performed. And so this was like a really creative way to get, faculty of arts, students, and the public involved in a new way to sort of communicate the emotion and feel of a volcanic eruption with a video going in the background during the live performance. So that was pretty cool. And I think stuff like that,
cool.
building off like what Andy was talking about earlier.
Yeah, yeah. Thomas, are you talking with OMSI at all, with the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry, about the conference?
Not yet. We've worked with the High Desert Museum, like closer to Bend, but not with OMSI yet. We are waiting to have the website in place, and we have also like some kind of document for potential, sponsors and donors. But there's also that Oregon Origins is another like group working on putting together shows related to the Earth, and so that would be dedicated to volcanoes. So we've got like plenty of people already interested in participating. The thing, like, as you probably know, the conference needs to pay for itself. So whatever we can do, we need to do it through registration fees. And so because it's the US and because it's banned and because it's July, it's already quite expensive. And so we want to keep the registration fee as low as possible. So people who are not, wealthy faculty in R1 university can still attend. And one thing of Citizen Volcanoes that we've been asked to really pay attention to is not to do a repeat of the General Assembly. So less science and more, application of the science. And so to do that, we need to reach out to communities that we are not necessarily used to in terms of how to contact them, newsletters, and so on. So that's something we're working on. And right now, I think we're working quite well. We've got a lot of people from different, background and interest, and so it's working well right now. So I'm quite happy. I'm just waiting for the website to have something more tangible, so then we can reach out to more people.
Okay. Well, and OMSI it's one of the few science museums that still actually builds exhibits around the US. And they have a lot of experience. They're kind of recognized as the science museum for the Northwest. So if you want to reach kids as an outgrowth of the conference, they would be good ones to talk to.
Yeah, their outreach staff was probably torn between that and the earthquake conference as well, because they've been very involved in the Shake Alert outreach.
Oh, is that what you were saying in the chat? It's the same time?
It is literally the same week. The National Earthquake Conference 13NC and COV 13 are the same week. So, a bunch of folks are like me are going to be trying to figure out how we're going to manage both of those.
Got it. Okay, anybody else? Really appreciate everybody's input. Again, the whole goal here was just to get some conversations started or continued, and happy to follow up with any of you that want. Andy, if you do get a group in Switzerland talking about some of this stuff, I'd love to hear what you come up with. So
yeah, I think that's from me and Tom G to try and figure out.
Yeah, I'm teaching during IFC, so then I don't have to teach next year just before Citizen Volcanoes. So I won't be in Geneva, unfortunately. And because of our USGS colleague, they don't know if they can travel at all. So most of the people from the USGS involved with COV 13 might not even be at IFC either. But I'm in contact with Uli, and so we are IFC knows what our progress and so on. So. But I'm happy to attend remotely if I can.
Okay.
Actually, the one other thought, and one of the things that Michael and I have talked about is on the other side of the ledger, are there some city conferences where bringing some of this perspective in might be useful? The Metro Lab Network, which had a conference in Portland a couple of years ago, looks at cities and technology. But Michael, you might have some ideas at some point where we could bring some of these folks in to talk about some of these issues.
Yeah, there's actually going to be a regional meeting of Western regional meeting of city and county sustainability directors. I'll need to check the time, but maybe it's 6 or 8 months from now.
Yeah.
So last week I attended a meeting from the Confederate Tribes of Oregon. So they were the 9 tribes, and it was about preparedness. And so each of these groups, they have different, issues depending on where they live exactly in terms of flooding versus snowstorm versus everything. And they were they share every, I think it's every 4 times a year, they share their day-to-day problems and tips and advice and where they were able to get some money to do this. And they had this new bag that inflate when they are in contact with water for flooding. And so they were sharing all of that on a regular basis. And that was organized also by the Oregon Health Authority and Oregon Health Department of Human Services. And so this group also, I've got contact with all of this group now through COV 13, and I'm happy to share this list of contacts. I've names and what they do and their phone number and email address and so on. So if you're interested, I'm more than happy to share that list. I've asked them, and it's a list that I can share. So
great. Okay. Well, thank you all very much. And those of you in the US, good luck dealing with everything. And, see, we'll have another more traditional wildfire session next month.